What if you could take that risk, make that change, reach that goal, live your best life? Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast, where we get together with amazing experts and everyday people who share challenges, encourage healing, and explore the possibilities that life has to offer. I'm your host, Gary Scott, and I'm excited that you're along for the ride. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast. And today, my wonderful guest, we're going to get into some great rabbit holes. I'm really excited about this, is Evan Jaqua. Welcome, Evan. Thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you, Gary. It's wonderful to be here. As I say, it's an honor, and I'm looking forward to hopefully the first of many discussions starting today and down the road. There's a lot to talk about and a lot of ideas to exchange, and I'm really looking forward to an exciting and stimulating conversation.
Me too, buddy. And I know that we're going to go there because I've gone down the rabbit hole of Evan already. So even without you, it was interesting and exciting. So with you, it's going to be even better. But I'm just going to fire off your bio.
Okay, perfect.
And just one of the paragraphs from your site, because
Uh-huh.
your website has so much, there's so much good stuff. But this one paragraph I thought might introduce you a little bit. So, everybody, we have Evan Jaqua as a successful international business development specialist with an immense range of personal and work experience in multiple countries. Fluent in several foreign languages, the ideas form the basis of the solutions party, come from having seen the world from multiple perspectives. He has concluded that this is a critical time in history and urgent reform is needed so that our country can not only reverse its alarming decline, but also, most importantly, achieve its potential based on freedom and prosperity. And real quick, I just want to go into one of your paragraphs. There's so much there, but Evan says, as a first step, we need to take the addiction of power out of our politics by eliminating reelection. Second, we must have elections about ideas instead of mindless tribalism. Other needed measures include changing the very notion of political parties and taking action to make our journalism robust and trustworthy again. Bold change must bring about widespread prosperity. Achieving it means getting rid of the alliance of special interest and greedy politicians and basing our economy on a combination of unlimited energy and a creative, adaptive workforce and a market-based economy. I loved all of that and like 50,000 other words I read on your podcast. But before I let you go, I just have to get out my what if you could question. So with
Okay.
that introduction and all that being said, I know this is going to be a great and very timely
Mhm.
conversation. But
Mhm.
so we're the What If You Could podcast. Do you
Uh-huh.
have any what if you could thoughts for us? What if you could things that happen in
Yeah.
your life, or what is your what if you could?
What if my could is pretty simple. It's, as you read about my bio, I've had the wonderful opportunity of seeing the world from different points of view. And the thing that really bothers me more than anything is that our greatest squandered resource as a species is human talent. It really bothers me to see kids who will never have an opportunity to achieve their potential, or people who, for different circumstances in our country and around the world, who have so much to offer if they were have only been given an opportunity to achieve that potential and had the tools available to achieve that potential. What if I could do anything, it would be to contributing to making a world where all people have the opportunity to achieve their potential and to live a fulfilling life. Because it just breaks my heart when I see so many young children who are growing up in such immense poverty, or just people in our country who have to work, 16 hours a day, two jobs, a day, and they're either working or they're commuting. They don't have time to have, a fulfilling life and to grow personally and to, have more quality time with their family. So for me, the thing that I would love to be able to do is just to contribute in some way to a world where we could all, achieve our potential. Because a squandered mind, squandered creativity really is a loss for all of us. And we have to, I think of uh, great human potential as a terribly squandered resource. And we have to, what I would like to do is to make a world, or to help make a world where that is a thing of the past. So I guess that would be my if you could, wish. And so yeah, in a nutshell.
I think what you talk about a lot on your site and with your visions and stuff, not just for our country, but for the world and for
Mhm.
everybody's in it, because you want everyone to do well. There's no
Mhm.
bubble over the country, but you talk about visionaries, but what you just said kind of leads me to role models. I mean,
Mhm.
do we have any role models left on the planet? Or who do you see as a role model that maybe these kids, can look towards as far as some sort of advancement and what maybe we can achieve?
Yeah, it's funny because when you talk about role models, what inevitably happens is that you name a person, and then people will find, reasons, that, well, this person wasn't perfect, or this person did this, that, or the other thing. And so, you can never really, I mean, you know, you can never really name anybody who's going to be, a perfect role model, and that's okay.
Yeah.
The thing is we humans are flawed. And, what is the important thing is, those people, let's look at our founding fathers, for example. They weren't perfect people by any means, but they laid the foundation for this wonderful experiment we call democracy. Now, let's think a little bit about how the world has operated for 99.99% of its history. The world, the nations of the world have throughout history been ruled by monarchs, kings, emperors, warlords, religious leaders, small groups of elites. Democracy is an experiment which turns that on its head. You give the power to the people. No one person, no matter how rich they are, no matter how many, how much military power they have, you're talking about a general or whatever, has any more power than just the average person. And that's a very radical idea. Now, there are a lot of people in this world, powerful people, who want to see democracy fail. And I see it as right now, I see that we're in a very a future-defining struggle with anti-democratic forces that want to destroy our democracy. And one of them, for example, let's just the what is the greatest threat to tyrants and dictators like Putin and Nicolas Maduro and the others? It's successful democracies. Why did the Soviet Union collapse? It collapsed because of the freedom and prosperity gap that existed between us and the West. And what Putin, for example, in Ukraine fears most is a successful, prosperous democracy on his border, Ukraine. And that's why he is so determined to not only destroy democracy in Ukraine, but to destroy democracy worldwide. There's a reason why Russian trolls, infiltrate our social media and spur the tribalism. They know that tribalism and democracy can't exist. Democracy is supposed to be a competition of ideas. It's not supposed to be tribal warfare, because once it's tribal warfare, you can't settle your disagreements. We are always going to disagree. We have always disagreed. The key question is how do you handle those disagreements? Well, throughout history, how did people handle disagreements? They sharpened the swords, they sharpened the spears, and they went at it, and the best band of brawlers won. Eventually, we figured out that wasn't the best way to solve problems and move forward. So, we have to understand that, we're always going to disagree, and we have to, instead of tribalizing things, we have to maintain civility. Let's focus on the ideas. Let's get the emotion manipulation and the lies out of the picture and concentrate on the ideas. Because if you're really confident on your ideas, so let's talk about a salesperson. A salesperson who's really confident about their product doesn't have to lie about their product. They don't have to lie about the competition. A fourth-rate salesperson will lie about their product and they'll lie about the competition. And so what our politicians are now are basically fourth-rate salespeople backed up with a lot of money. Oh, they lie about themselves, about what their opponents stand for. And our politics have devolved into a game or a circus of emotion manipulation and lies instead of a healthy competition of ideas. And I don't think this is a natural level. I think that there are forces that want that to happen. I think that uh, there's just people of politicians get elected. Liars, unfortunately, in our country, liars win elections.
Well, I
What?
mean,
Yes.
there's so much there, Evan, but I mean, I think one of the biggest challenge we have right now is who is telling the truth? Is anyone telling the truth? When you talk about the tribalism, which it's absolutely madness right now. I mean, people will argue just for the sake of arguing, whether they get the point or not. We've got people who, in their heart and soul, believe something isn't right, but yet
Yes.
they'll defend it to their death because that would make them be on the other side. If
Yeah.
even a smallish crack of them agreeing on any point on the other side
Yeah.
would then invalidate everything they believe, so they can't even move. They can't move.
Yes.
They can't cross that line. So who's telling the truth? What is the truth?
Just to comment a little bit briefly on that, I kind of like to make an analogy with you're familiar with space black holes? If you there's a thing called the event horizon that if you cross, you can never come back out. Well, there's something I like to make an analogy. What I call is the fanatic event horizon. It's the point of emotional investment where after which you cross, there's very little likelihood you're ever going to return to reality-based thinking because you've invested so much emotionally into that. So I call that the
Exactly.
fanatic event horizon.
We are
And
there. We are there now.
yes, I know. For example, I do have an X account, Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, and it's just a mud fight. It's people are talking against it. It's just insults and name calling, and there's no discussion. It's two parallel universes. And so, how do we get out of this terrible situation that we're in? And what I come back to is, Ronald Reagan said, government is the problem. Well, I actually think that that is not quite accurate. I think it comes down to our politicians, the people in whom we give the sacred power of the people. Because what is really true about the human brain is that the human brain, a marvelous thing, but it very easily forms addictions, whether we're talking about gambling, whether we're talking about social media, whether we're talking about drugs, alcohol, you name it. We get addicted to things very easily, including very negative emotions like rage and hate. They're seductive but probably the most addictive thing of all is power. People want In some cases, they'll go extreme, like the Syrian dictator who will drop barrel bombs on innocent people to stay in power, or the North Korean dictator who will send entire families to gruesome prison camps where they're tortured death in unimaginable ways, or Putin who poisons political opponents. But this addiction to power is not just the monopoly of tyrants. In our country, too, our politicians, once they get in power, as George Will said, the famous conservative columnist said, there's not a dime of difference between Democrats and Republicans in that their first priority is staying in power. Okay, you have to ask yourself, is that why we're putting people in power, in office, so that their first priority is staying there? It's like if you hired somebody for a 4-year contract and they spent half their time on the job just playing politics to get a contract extension. I don't think you'd be very happy with that contract employee, and you'd probably fire him, and you should. What we have to do, as long as people get addicted to power so easily, you have to approach it like as if I were going to give you, Gary, a very addictive, I'm a doctor and I have to give you a highly addictive medication, what would I do to prevent you from getting addicted to it? I'd give you small doses spread apart. And that's exactly how power has to be allocated. So the message is going to be you'll get elected for one term. And during that term, you cannot run for another office. You can't use that position as a springboard for your next election. So, and not only that, once your term ends, you cannot run for another office for 2 years. So you have one chance to make your mark on history. You have one chance to make a difference. You don't need to spend any time raising funds for your campaign. You don't need to spend any time in constant campaign mode. You have one chance to make a difference, so make the most of it. Make the most of it. You're not going to get, there's no reelection here. So, how often have you heard, for example, well, such and such politician is not up for reelection so they can vote their conscience? I mean, isn't that ridiculous? I mean, why aren't they voting their conscience all the time? Why is it first
What were
cut?
you voting for before you got your conscience in, right?
Yes.
What was that?
Why?
But see,
Well,
you bring up so many things though, but
mm,
here's in my little tiny brain, right? Yes,
mhm,
we're addicted to so many things so easily. We're so addicted to negativity. I mean, just in our own
right,
brains, right? We
right,
70,000 negative thoughts a day. We tell ourselves all day. We tell ourselves negative
right.
thoughts.
Mhm,
So it's so easy, but I see the politicians as just being a pawn or puppet of the media, who is
mhm.
just a pawn or puppet of a higher somebody somewhere. So you get someone and go, that person looks great. Boy, they'll make a great politician. So let's put them as a politician. Let's get the media to pump them as the perfect solution to all of our world's problems, and then they get placed in position. And the day they swear in, they leave and start raising money for their next election.
Yes,
They're just
exactly.
placed there to be a vote for whomever wants them there, and the media just completely perpetuates their lie.
Yes, and I think it's very important that we talk a little bit about the media and journalism at this point, because one of the reasons why people are so on board is because people don't know what the truth is. There's no trust in the media anymore.
Yeah.
And the one of the reasons is because, in the old days to start a news organization, whether you're talking about a radio station or a television network or even a newspaper, required a lot of resources. You couldn't just start a newspaper. You had to, willy-nilly. You had to have printing presses, you had to have reporters, you had to have a department that would handle the advertising, you had to have distribution. It was not a simple thing, but now any Joe with a laptop and a web page can start a news site. So news, the conventional news business model doesn't work anymore. So what have we gotten instead of that? Channels like Fox or MSNBC, what is their business model there? Their business model is emotion manipulation. They get that is, people don't go to, let's say, they don't go to watch, pro wrestling to see the art of the sport. They go to see pro wrestling to get riled up. And that's exactly what our news has become. It's like the world pro wrestling of news. And people, because why? Because once they get addicted to those emotions, once they get addicted to that, they come back for their daily doses of rage inducing
Yes.
content. And so, if you believe like I do, that the pen is mightier than the sword, we have to think of journalism as part of our national defense because robust journalism, defends us not only from enemies abroad, the trolls abroad, but from enemies within. We have to have, in order for our democracy to function, we have to have um, a basic set of facts that we all agree upon. Because if we don't agree on the basic facts, we can't make anything happen. So,
But you nailed it so perfectly though right there, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but so there's a challenge. I am really hard left, or I am really hard right. So to feed my rage, I'm not even looking for news anymore. I don't even care if what they tell me is true or not. I just know if I go to MSNBC, I'm going to get reloaded up with my negative rage on the left, or if I go to Fox, I'm going to get loaded up with my
exactly.
negative rage on the right. And that's all I care about. There is no in between anymore. I mean, I don't. I mean, unless you know of one where you could
Well,
say, no, these guys like Wall Street Journal is pretty, middle of the road, or Reuters is pretty, or Abij, I can't even say it. Abij, the news
yeah,
organization I'm talking
the
about,
Arab
Al
one,
Gorba.
yeah.
But you know what I mean? So where do you go? You either
Hmm.
go to feed what you already believe because you just want more rage
Hmm.
reloaded,
Hmm.
or where do you go? What
Yeah.
is the alternative?
Well, that this brings up one. I'll just make one comment. If people want to believe that, purple leprechauns from Mars are running things, they're going to believe it. They're going to find, I mean, I could say that I could start there was QAnon. I could start a QAnon-like thing and say that, the Republican Party is kidnapping, Democratic children to take them to their planet to feed them to Bigfoot. I mean, I mean, and people some people are gonna believe that, just like they believed QAnon. And so, how do we solve this problem? And the problem is that there are two things. We have to, number one, recognize that journalism, the conventional news model, does not work anymore. And so, and number two, uh, we have to come up with a way to make our news and our journalism credible again. And the way that I have proposed, and this is, in discussions with other people, is just that, we certify doctors, we certify lawyers, we certify database engineers, we certify truckers. So we've got to have a way to certify our journalists and to our news organizations. And why is this important? Because, for example, um, if we have certified news sites and certified journalists, okay, suppose, Gary, I make an AI fake video of you breaking into a jewelry store or something, and I publish that on my website. Okay, now the question is if we have certified news sites and certified journalists, the first question is, well, okay, was that video of Gary published on a certified news site, or was it published on Joe Blow's news site? As deep fakes become more sophisticated, it's increasingly important that we have credible news sites that can tell us or if this is fake or not. So how do we certify our journalists? Well, I think that one thing, if you get a degree in journalism, you'll automatically be certified. Or if you have a track record of being a journalist, you'll automatically certify. But apart from that, we have to have a grading system where you grade them on their neutrality, you grade them on the quality of their writing, on the relevancy of their articles, on the frequency of their articles, and the higher the rating, the more credible they'll be. And if they tend to be biased, now how can we judge bias? Well, I think what we need is sort of something similar to a Rotten Tomatoes like model, where we have a range of evaluators who can not only, people, but even AI programs, a range of AI programs. So it will give an average score for the different, let's say, subvariables.
But Ev,
Right.
we already have that. That's the challenge, which it goes back to trust the science. It's trust the science, right? It's like you have to believe this because we are the professionals. You have to trust the science. Well, that's bullshit. Trust the science is the most ridiculous. Trust the science is the most anti-science thing ever human. And then people go, well, go to Snoops. Snoops is totally legit. You can go to Snoops and they'll tell you whether the story's true or not. Or you could go to this or you could that. So we have that. It's like
Yeah, but
who's gonna be the decider?
yeah.
Who's gonna be the one that says, all right, Evan's got a brilliant idea, and we all agree that
Mhm.
that should be the case. But then who do we select? Who do we trust to be the decider of what's true or not? Because you're seeing in Europe, Europe has now decided that they're the deciders.
Mhm.
That the European government or whomever is going to decide if your post is true or not, and if you should be thrown in jail for forwarding an emoji or a meme, right?
Yeah.
So who's going to be the decider?
Yeah, that's why you don't want one organization, certifying, or I should say, you could have one organization certifying, but you don't want one organization grading. And that's why you want to have a variety. You want to even have people who are recognized evaluators and AI programs of, differently, independently, uh, but tested AI programs that will get that because you don't want that. That's why I say you want kind of a Rotten Tomatoes approach, which you'll get an average from different points of view. And some AI models might categorize an article as being slightly right, another one might slightly left. Maybe one AI program will categorize as extremely right. But you have others who are giving those evaluations. And so any certified journalist will have whatever they publish or whatever they do on radio or television analyzed and graded. And some of this will be automated, some of it won't. And so, and what the thing is that let me just say this. If you choose to disbelieve everything, you're liable to believe anything. And and so there are going to be some people who, even if it's a certified news site, are going to refuse to believe it. There are going to be some places, some quote unquote political infotainment channels that claim to be news sites who are going to say proudly not certified. But um, uh, if we do have a certification and grading process that is not dependent on one evaluator, the government, uh, it's a range of different evaluators and different, both human and technological. I actually worked in the field of AI. I have some things to say about AI. AI could actually be very useful for this, to helping to categorize this. And some evaluators might be way off in certain things, but that's okay. Just like so you see movie reviews, you might get 99 positive, and then one just gives a 1 star. But that's okay. It's the average that matters. And so this is critical. That's number one. The number one thing I think we need to do is we have to certify our journalists and our news organizations in order to. And number two is, I think we have to, as I said, our journalism has to be thought of as a part of our national defense, and it has to have the moral equivalency of our armed forces. Now, I think we have to recognize that the traditional news model doesn't work anymore. That's why small town newspapers don't exist anymore. And that's terrible, because small town newspapers were watchdogs for local corruption and for helping to keep the community together. So if you are a certified journalist, what we'll have is what I call a press fund, into which the government can contribute, corporations can contribute, ordinary citizens can contribute, but it's not controlled by any one entity. And if you are a certified journalist, you will automatically be qualified. You'll only be qualified for getting a monthly stipend, and that stipend will increase with your grade, and it'll increase with the number of relevant articles you write. And so you don't make somebody having to write what I call clickbait in order to make a living. They can concentrate on their job of reporting the truth, and this truth will be their articles will be evaluated for are they fact-based, and if they're opinion-based, that's okay. We want to hear opinions, but we want principled opinions. And what do I say? This is another thing that is so key. So key. Let me talk a little bit about principles here, okay? Principles in journalism or in our everyday lives. Okay, one of the Constitution's most important um, ideas is this idea of equality under the law. And what does that mean? That means that you concentrate on the transgression, not on the characteristics of the person or the victim and the perpetrator. And an example is in the Jim Crow era. If a white man sexually assaulted a black woman, well, that was just boys being boys, boys out having some fun. But if a black man sexually assaulted a white woman, then it's like, okay, time to get the noose. Okay, so we're talking the same crime. All we do is switch the color of the perpetrator and the victim. See, that violates that whole concept of equality under the law. But that concept applies in our everyday lives. Why are we going to listen to a commentator who is going to completely change their opinion if you just switch the names of the people and the parties? We want principled commentators who don't just switch their opinion if you switch a name here or two. That's tribalism, because once you start down a road of tribalizing your laws, or then or non once you get rid of that principle of equality under the law, laws will become weaponized and used by one tribe against another, and civilization breaks down in that. This whole concept of equality under the law is the foundation of our civilization, because once we abandon that, we go back to tribal warfare. This concept, though, has to apply to journalists. You cannot, if I like to read opinions from principal journalists across the political spectrum. These are people I know they're not going to switch their opinion if you just switch the name of the Republican and Democrat Party around, or if you switch Donald Trump's name with Hillary Clinton's name,
Yeah.
for example, let's take an example. I'm not going to pick on, I don't want to pick necessarily on Donald Trump, but let's just say, let's go back to 2018. Now, if Hillary Clinton had been president and Hillary Clinton had called the Ukrainian president and said, I want you to dig up dirt on Donald Trump, my anticipated 2020 opponent, you can imagine how they would have reacted on Fox News. And as they should, as they should. But if Donald Trump does it, well, it's just a witch hunt. It's no big deal at all. We don't want things like that. Just like with the Democrats and Bill Clinton. If Bill Clinton had been a Republican, I can guarantee you all the Democrats would have switched their vote to impeach, and all the Republicans would have switched their vote to acquit.
But using those analogies, though, I
Uh-huh.
think here's where we see a challenge in my
Uh-huh.
little brain. Okay,
Uh-huh.
I mean, we might as well make Maury Povich and the Jerry Springer Show and the National Enquirer the actual news, and make Fox and MSNBC editorial shows, because it's really all they are is editorial shows. But to use your example, so Donald Trump is not the president. Hillary Clinton is the president. And so Hillary makes the call to Zelensky and says, "Hey, dig up dirt on my upcoming opponent," right?
Right.
Fox News goes crazy,
Right.
right?
Right.
But nobody else does,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, reverse it. Donald
Mm-hmm.
Trump makes a call to Zelensky.
Mm-hmm.
Fox News goes, it was a great call. Didn't you see it? But every other news organization on the planet goes crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? So you've
Mm-hmm.
got one network. You've got Fox, who's traditionally right leaning, but you've got to admit, basically every other traditional news organization, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, are left leaning media.
Yeah, and
They
that's
just are.
exactly.
So you've got one against many, and it's a pretty
Well,
uneven scale. Wouldn't you
well,
agree?
well, I don't know because I mean, you got Newsmax. You not only that, you have
Right, but
conspiracy
those
sites.
are not broadcast. Those are newer sort of forms
Right.
of traditional, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're just sitting there at home and you've got ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, you've got NPR, you've got PBS, and you've got MSNBC, you
Yeah.
got to admit that majority of the elite,
Right.
network media is
Right.
left leaning. It just
Yeah.
is.
But you also have the fact that a lot of people are getting their news from places like
Yes,
X, from
that's what's
Facebook,
changing the
yes.
dynamic.
And that's exactly why we need to have certified news sites because if people X, there's just all sorts of stuff on X. People
Yes.
are publishing, they'll put out wild stuff and people will believe it. And this is why, and then when it comes with the certification would also come with the evaluation of their neutrality. How principled are they? You see, right now, why do we have left leaning and right leaning? Because it's all about emotion manipulation. It's all
Yeah.
about, that's the business model. It's not about providing facts anymore. And we've got to get back to facts. And how do we do that? We do it with two ways. We recognize traditional news is no longer a viable business model. We're going to make it a national part of, I mean, I don't want to say a part of the Department of Defense, but something analogous to that.
But isn't that what NPR is and PBS? I mean, isn't NPR supposed to be our national public radio? It's supposed to be an independent government funded,
Yeah, that's
you
the
know,
problem. It's
but it's
government funded.
not. It's so hard leaning left. It's unbelievable. It's not even I don't know
Yeah,
why we still fund it.
and that's exactly why you've got to have not only certification, you've got to have a grade because if they are consistently one way or the other, that's going to lower the grade. And as a matter of fact, if their grade falls, say, before a C, they no longer have access to this National Press Fund. So you encourage them to focus on facts, and if they are going to be opinion, they're going to provide opinions because it's important we hear people's opinions. They provide a range of opinions. It's okay to have commentators who are in fact it's important we have commentators on both the left and the right. It's important
Right,
we
of
have
course.
civil debate. We have civil debate between the right and left because I'm going to tell you our greatest strength, you know, I think somebody lived in, I lived in China. I was part of, actually, I was married to a Chinese woman, and their family suffered terribly under the Cultural Revolution. And I've had so many relationships with people from China. And one Chinese individual who lives in the United States told me once that the greatest thing about living in America is our freedom of thought. Because in places like China, in North Korea, only one thought is acceptable. And you know, we have to understand that diversity of our ideas, of our opinions, is our greatest strength. And if we combine that with civility and exchange of ideas, we're going to be, our democracy can achieve its potential. And if our democracy achieves its potential, the prosperity will come with that. And not only that, the freedom and prosperity gap will become so great between us and the wretched autocracies that eventually they'll fall, just like the Soviet Union fell. I mean, I can remember back in 1982 when President Reagan said, let's throw communism onto the ash heap of history. People laughed. They said, what is this guy smoking? And within 10 years, what happened? They collapsed. And they should have, because it was a wretched, disgusting system. And, you know, people complain about or say, well, NATO expanded, to the Russian border. It wasn't actually NATO expanding. These former Warsaw Pact countries ran to NATO because they never again wanted to live under Russian tyranny. That's the horror of Russian tyranny. And anybody who's had any uh, you know, um, uh, experience living in a totalitarian environment understands that. You see, not to digress here, but I actually don't have any problem if the people of a country want to have a communist government or if they want to have a theocracy. The critical thing is that they always retain the power to remove that government through free, fair, and peaceful elections. If they hear the arguments that are presented fairly and honestly, and they choose a communist government, that's their right. But the thing you've got to avoid is totalitarian, a concentration of power. You've got to avoid it. The power always has to be with the people. And so, the real enemy is not necessarily communism. It's not necessarily, theocracy. The real enemy is totalitarianism and autocracy, where you have an over-concentration of power. And why is this particularly dangerous now? This is a critical point in human history because if democracy fails, the forces that want to ensure it never comes back have technology at their disposal now that can ensure that it can never come back. Just like what we're seeing in China with the surveillance society they have now. All conversations through the smartphones are being not only recorded, but analyzed with AI to make sure that nobody even, and then you know what they're going to do, in Scientific America says before long we're going to have the ability to read thoughts. you know who's going to use that to their advantage? It will be the autocracies. Technology, this is another reason why we have to work for a world without autocracies, because the first thing the autocrat will ask whenever there's new technology is developed and made available is, how can I use it to cement my stranglehold on power? And so if democracy fails now, the technology exists through constant surveillance and AI to ensure that it never comes back. And this is why we have to recognize the danger.
We are already in 1984. I mean, we just are. Our smartphones are watching us. Our TVs are watching us.
That's
This is being monitored as we speak. But
exactly.
you just said something that is interesting because you talked about the purple guys coming down and taking our kids and taking them to space and feeding them QAnon gummy bears. And people will believe that.
Mm.
And I had mentioned, the it's not the politicians, the media creates these people, the politicians, and the media are owned and run by them. So you just said the forces. Are there forces, in your humble opinion, my humble opinion, are there forces? Who are they? And besides the destruction of America, what do they want?
Well, okay, let's just be clear. There's no like worldwide organization, democracy haters are us. It's not some like the old Get Smart program, the chaos.
Chaos.
Yeah,
We have to go in the
yeah.
cone of silence. We
No,
should have a cone
it's
of silence.
it's not like that. It's it's maybe you could call a loose coalition of, let's say, autocrats who are doing everything they can. I mean, like one of the reasons we have an immigration crisis, the refugee crisis is actually being weaponized to weaken our democracies. There's a reason why the Belarus dictator sends refugees from Syria into Europe. There's a reason why Nicolas Maduro and Daniel Ortega are causing millions to flee to the democracies because these weaken the democracies.
Yeah.
Okay, then you've got very powerful people, very rich people who, the thing is that people who've been very successful, it can go to their head and they can start thinking that they are somehow like a different class of human being. I mean, honestly, when you hear, and again, I'm sorry for picking on Donald Trump, but if you hear when he says something like, I have a winning gene, and that makes him, uniquely set up to, run the country, that is very similar to how people in Europe used to justify the monarchy. It was called the divine right of kings. The divine right of kings was that these people who are ruling us are there because God has chosen them to rule over us. It's their sacred duty to rule over us. And that when we declared that all men are created equal, that was a repudiation of this divine right of kings. There is nobody born with some inherent God-given ability a right to rule over others. And so when people, say like, well, like when he says winning gene, well, that's basically a kind of a divine right of kings argument. But that extends to people for whom, they're so rich, they're so wealthy, and they've enjoyed this their entire life. Many of them are not even self-made, rich people. And the most dangerous power is inherited power because it's the most insecure. And so I've met people, for example, the grandson of a large corporation who's now the CEO. And these people are incredibly arrogant and incredibly insecure. They're arrogant, they're insecure because they're arrogant, or vice versa. And they're arrogant because they're insecure, I should say. Because no matter what they do in life, they've always got that ghost tugging at their elbow saying, you wouldn't be nothing if it weren't for your daddy, or you wouldn't be nothing if it weren't for your granddaddy. And so these people, a lot of times, they look desperately for some way to justify in their own mind that they deserve this, that they have some God-given ability or some God-given right that others don't have. And this goes to their head. They think they have, they don't like a democracy. You know, I believe, that and again, I don't mean to always pick on Donald Trump here, but let's face it, he's always run his organization like a tyrant, like a dictator. It's the thing that he understands. And compromise and dialogue are things that he's never had to deal with in his own organization. So I see him as wanting to run the country like he runs the Trump organization, sort of as, my word, and that's it. There is no, dialogue here. And that's why I think he can relate to people like Putin, because that's how they run their country. And this is not just him, but I think people, other very wealthy, very powerful individuals, uh, would like to see a system where democracy fails and they are the small group of elites that runs the country, and very powerful special interests who see their business model potentially being threatened by democracy. If for example, if the people decide they want to abolish the Second Amendment, well, that's something that the gun industry doesn't want to ever see happen. And so, they might feel vulnerable to that happening. And so, they might see themselves as benefiting if democracy collapsed, or if other industries that are very powerful and don't want to see their present business model threatened through the power of the people, could very well want to see the democracy collapse. So this to answer your question, I'm not talking
But
about,
wouldn't you agree though that's kind of what we're seeing now?
of course.
To play just devil's advocate with Donald Trump is, don't you see him going in and trying to tear down some of these huge institutions? Big pharma's has too much control. Big ag has too much control. The
Yeah.
industrial military complex has too much control.
Yeah.
Tobacco getting into food has too much control.
Yes.
The Fed
Uh,
has too much control. I
I
mean,
t okay.
there's so many things that need to be torn down
You're exactly right. You're exactly
because
right.
but no one's going to ever do it. No one's ever going to set term limits on themselves. And no one's ever, sometimes you need a wrecking ball to go in and go, you know what? I do need to run it like this for a little bit. I've only have 4 years. Actually, he only has 2 years because in 2026, if people aren't happy, he loses the House and the Senate. So he's
Hmm.
a lame duck for the next 2 years. And then the
Hmm.
next guy, like you said, then they'll come in with blue curtains, and then it'll be red curtains, and it'll be blue. It'll never end, right? They'll just keep changing the colors of the curtains in the Oval Office. So is it a bad thing? Well, what do you
No,
think of
no.
Doge?
It's
What do you think
okay.
of Doge?
Okay.
What is I mean, isn't Doge doing what we want to do?
Okay, let me just say this. I make proposals on the web page for government reform, and one of those is let's limit government employment wherever possible to 5 years, so we
Yep.
don't get the lifetime bureaucrat. And not only that, let's bring in, we hire every year, as some people their 5 year term is in, their 5 year contract is ending. New students, or high school grads, college grads. Let's make this available to people who are trying to get their first job. They come in and we're giving them encouragement to find ways to reduce waste, to make things more efficient. These young creative minds who don't have a long-term vested interest in being a bureaucrat, let's have them find ways to make government more efficient. Okay. And number two, let's have the Pentagon start a war on waste, in collaboration with outside experts, because right now it's completely opaque. There's just a feeding frenzy there. I mean, both parties send blank checks to the Pentagon every year.
Yes,
You send a
yes.
blank check to a bureaucracy, is it any wonder that a feeding frenzy occurs? And we can't
Yeah,
have
and
that. We have
it's even worse because I have a lot of friends in government, and what it does is they're allotted a bunch of money. If they don't use it, if they actually cut spending, and if they don't use it, then they don't get allotted as much next
exactly.
time. So they're like, we have to use every penny so we get more next time. They have no incentive to go less and reform.
Exactly. Exactly. So, we want to turn that on its head. And if they save money, that the individual members will get a commission. That's what, for example, if you find a way to save money, you will be rewarded with a commission that would be maybe 1% of what you saved over 5 years. And that can be a lot of money. But, you know, and so we want to give the individuals within the government, these temporary employees. We want to make government work temporary, because honestly, long-term government work, I've never seen. I've worked with bureaucrats in Japan, in Peru, in here, and you get this bureaucratic mentality where it's create complexity, justify existence instead of simplify and solve. Well, we want to have a simplify and solve mentality there, and reward them for that. Now, getting back specifically to Doge, okay, let me just be very clear. Everybody wants to see our government more efficient. We're all sick and tired of the
Not
waste.
everybody, apparently.
Well, okay, that's a generalization. That's a generalization. But you see, the problem I have with Doge is that it's being driven by one political party. Now, the thing is that what is a political party's priorities? It's get their members reelected and expand their power. So I have very little faith, and I'm sorry to say, that this is actually being carried out in a professional, neutral way to make government more efficient. I think that it's actually being used to expand the power of one party. It's about a power grab. I would have a lot more faith if they brought in independent experts who are going to do a real cost benefit analysis of USAID, for example. Maybe having two or three firms do independently cost benefit analysis. Let's really get a neutral take on whether or not this is really working or not. And number two, having neutral experts actually auditing these things to find the waste. Because if never get your facts from a politician, and if they say that they've saved this because of this fraud, or they saved this because of this fraud, I can guarantee you they're probably exaggerating, and putting it mildly, they're probably exaggerating. If we could see this waste presented to us in an independent, politically neutral way, then it would be a lot more credible. So
But
I,
don't you see one party fighting against even doing any auditing, and another party? I don't know if Elon Musk, I've been torn on him for a long time. Like I'm not an EV guy, and I've been torn on him for a long time.
right.
I'm never sure if I'm in on the Musk thing, right? But I have to think to myself, at least someone's doing something. Someone's in there digging up, and we know U.S. AID is not a legit organization. I mean, there's some things that they do, but the percentage of what they're finding, which is good, compared to the percentage of their finding is massive waste, fraud, and abuse, is pretty incredible. So why is one side fighting so hard to not do an audit? Why don't they do what you said? Why don't they go, you know what, you guys are right. Let's start blowing this stuff up. Let's use AI. Let's use these young kids who have no political affiliation, and let's do it together. Let's do it
Right.
together. But
Yes.
instead, they're saying, stop what you're doing. Don't do anything. We hate you. You're wrong. I mean,
Well, this is okay. You see, this is a result of the mindless tribalism we have now. It's not
yeah.
about, and this is why I think moving a little bit on to the whole subject of political parties is that George Washington, as I mentioned on my thing, warned against political parties that they become vehicles for corrupt people to advance their own interests. And there's a famous historian who my favorite historian, Carroll Quigley. He wrote a book called The Evolution of Civilizations, and he said that one of the things that always happens to human organizations is they become institutionalized, which means that the vested interests of the organization become the priority. That's why we have a party first mentality with our political parties. I mean, let's take a look at the Communist Party, for example. That was set up supposedly to empower workers, and what it has become a vicious cult that oppresses millions throughout multiple countries and enriches the party leaders. Or even you look at organized religion, churches are supposed to be places where people worship and get spiritual meaning, and they become self-serving, greedy organizations themselves. This always happens with human organizations. I mean, look at sports on universities. Sports was set up to be a way to give recreation for the students to kind of blow off steam, and it becomes this vicious money-making institution in of it itself. And this always happens with organizations. So, but on the other hand, political parties serve a purpose, in theory, to allow people of similar ideas to organize and present candidates accordingly. So we got to have the best of both worlds. And how do we do that? I say, let's make political parties have limited lifetimes. Let's say 12 years or 16 years, so that,
now you're not talking about individuals. You're talking about the entire party. So the Democratic
yes,
Party is gone. The
exactly.
Libertarians jump in there. So you got Libertarians and Republican. Then the Republicans gone. And you got the Green Party and the
No,
Libertarians. So you're talking about
no,
the whole party rotating out.
I'm saying any political party, government recognized political party, and government recognized political party is one that has a certain minimum number of members. Any will have a lifetime of 12 years, let's say. I mean, we could quibble about how long it has to be. At the end of 12 years, that political party has to be disbanded. The leaders of that political party can never be leaders of another government recognized political party. And so in this way, you get political parties, fresh political parties every 12 years. I don't think the new political parties are just going to be carbon copies of the old one. Nobody's going to say, hey, we're going to be just like the last guys. They're going to want to present new ideas. They want to get people excited. And these new political parties won't have the tribal baggage that our political parties have do now. I mean, I actually worked in rural Utah when I was a teenager, delivering pop and bread to rural markets in Utah. And back then, 1976, I was just, I was young, just an adolescent, but working. People could talk, well, maybe I'll vote for Ford or maybe I'll vote for Carter. Still haven't decided. People were not just as viciously tribal now. I mean, you cannot even say you're going to vote for one person or the other and without them just going
You will
berserk.
not be invited to Thanksgiving dinner. You will
Yeah,
not get
yeah,
invited to Thanksgiving dinner or
exactly,
Christmas or Hanukkah or anything. But
exactly.
I love that. I love that thought. But here's what it goes back to what you're saying earlier about power. Your sentence about power is very, very right. You said they become like obsessed drug users captive to the most addicting thing of all, which is power. And
Yes.
that is an outstanding statement that you wrote. And here's the thing, not to throw anyone else under the bus, but I'm gonna use James Comey because he's such a piece of shit. So like James Comey will be one part of the government. He'll be a
Hmm.
tool in one part of the government. And then he'll go to Lockheed Martin and he'll make $8 billion. And then he'll
Hmm.
go back and then he'll be another part of the government. So
Hmm.
these people do leave. These creatures do leave. And you could see them going, well, God, if I've got to now become a libertarian to get back in government, I'll be a libertarian. Or if I got to be a
Hmm.
Republican, I'll be. They don't care. They do not have a soul. They do not have
Hmm.
a party. They don't care. Their
Hmm.
drug is power. So
Hmm.
how do we keep, like, I'm registered Green Party, right?
Right.
I was libertarian, but that wasn't far enough. I had to go Green Party because I had to escape even deeper
Right.
away from
Yeah.
the parties. So how do we keep these creatures, these animals, from just reappearing in a different
Yeah.
skin
Well, that's the thing, though, is that James Comey, how many years did he work in government? You work in government, what
forever?
happens? You get a lifetime bureaucratic mentality.
Yeah,
Everybody, every, uh, honestly, the worst people I've ever worked with are people who and I don't mean to badmouth, uh, you know, but the worst people I've ever worked with are the ones who've worked in government for years. They have this they're not workers. They're politicians.
yeah.
They play politics all the time. That's what they do. And just another kind of an example of this was this is a little bit a little bit of a tangent, but I remember I once went to the post office and there were three employees at the windows and two of them were just viciously abusing the third. The third was a woman of Chinese descent who was explaining to a client in Chinese, something about sending something. I didn't catch the details, but these two were just viciously tearing into her because she was going out of her way to help. And that's what you don't do. In a bureaucracy, it's all about conforming with the lowest common denominator.
Yeah.
You don't want to make anybody look bad. And this is what happens with lifetime government employment. And so that's one of the reasons we're going to have term limits. We don't want to do that in a way that's going to empower the lifetime bureaucrats. That's why we have to have government employment being limited to 5 years where possible. I mean, there are going to be some cases where we're going to want, maybe longer, like obviously in the military, you don't want to get rid of, and maybe certain types of inspectors but even those people, they could be let go, but brought on as consultants as needed. But you don't want to have people, become subject to, you don't get fired. It's very hard to get fired if you're a government employee,
Possible, yeah.
where you're playing politics, where you're looking busy, even though you're, I've seen how many times have I seen, bureaucrats are just making work. I can remember I had a government project in Japan and I had a meeting and it was an hour-long meeting. We spent 55 minutes of which just talking about whatever. In the last 5 minutes, he said, okay, I've got to make the meeting notes. So he just made up a bunch of stuff to make it look like we had had a really long, productive meeting. And that's why I say, look busy, create complexity. And this is also another thing
But
about
that's
bureaucrats.
the entire government. That's why I'm behind Doge. Like I said, if Elon's not the guy, great. If you want to make Chuck Schumer head of Doge, make Chuck Schumer. I don't care. Like I trust Chuck Schumer, but I mean, the 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 entire government is so bloated. Um,
Yes,
my
it's
my
so
my wife
wasteful.
worked for the county here out in California for many
Uh-huh.
years, and they
Hmm.
literally would open up offices and buildings with no one in them because they had to spend that budget money.
Yes,
They
yeah.
had to spend it. So it's like these people getting an email that says, "Hey, what did you do the last 5 days?"
Hmm.
and losing their mind over it because no, he's some dictator. No. Listen, if my boss wanted to know what I was doing, I replied, "Hey, this is what I've done." I don't know why we accept a bloated government as just it's just acceptable. And when the
Well, it
economy's
shouldn't.
tanking, we just hire more government employees to make it look like we fixed the economy, which is complete madness.
Yeah.
I mean, at some
Well,
point, like you're saying, this cycle has to stop, right?
yeah. Well, that's
It has to
exactly
stop.
why I say that every dollar has to be thought of as a precious national resource and has to be spent efficiently because every dollar that is wasted is a dollar that could have been used for a tax cut. It's a dollar that could have been used to fund some, less privileged child's education. It's a dollar that could have been, used to improve our infrastructure. Every dollar.
How about pay down the 37 trillion
Exactly,
dollar debt?
exactly. That's why I say so. We have to have a mentality, and that's why we make government employment temporary, 5 years, and we give the people these new people who have no long-term vested interest in the organization. And not only that, you're going to give them commission if they can find ways to make things more efficient. They can cut. Hey, if we just get rid of this, make this paperwork more efficient, we can save.
So walk me through again what the issue with Doge. So is it because it's not bipartisan? I mean, what? Because isn't Doge exactly what you're talking about? Isn't taking AI, and you know AI, I don't even have a clue. I can't even spell AI. I know it's got an A in it, but I mean, so you take AI and you go, listen, we know the Pentagon has been spending $10,000 for a hammer for 50 years. All
Yeah.
right. We know that the Department of Agriculture is broken. We know HUD is broken. We know Social Security has been in bankrupt
Hmm.
because we borrowed. Al Gore was talking about putting Social Security in a lockbox,
Hmm.
25 years ago when he ran for government, right? So none of these things are surprises to us that there's
Right.
government waste. None of it. No one, like you
Right.
said, there's no one in the country that doesn't agree reluctantly that the government is a bloated pile of crap that's run inefficiently. Right? If you
Hmm.
want something broken, give the government the ability to run it and they'll screw it up massively.
Hmm.
Okay?
Hmm. Hmm.
So so this one party comes along and says, I'm going to dig into this. I'm going to hand it
Uh-huh.
to this brilliant dude, and I'm going to let him just take AI with a bunch of
Right.
young kids, and we're going to find this stuff.
Right. Yeah. My biggest issue is again, the idea is I'm in total favor of it. I just have a lot of trouble believing that there's not a political ulterior motive in a lot of the cuts that they're doing. You see,
Okay,
I
but to
would.
use your term, though, to use your
Oh.
words, if not now, when? If not these
Hmm.
guys, who? Because no one's going to do it. When they turn the curtains blue,
Hmm.
you're guaranteed they're going to shut this down. They're not going to do it.
Well,
So
that's
if
exactly.
not now, I mean, who are we going to turn to do it?
Well, that's exactly what I'm proposing. So that that's exactly what I'm
Help
hoping
me, Evan. Help me, Evan.
no, this how this movement becomes where we, we get politicians who are in there, they have no long-term interest in their position because they can't run for reelection. And you combine this, I mean, there's a whole series of problems and challenges that we have to address, and one of them is government efficiency. And I am obviously, as I propose on the website, ways to make our government more efficient, getting rid of lifetime government employees. And that's another thing. You don't have lifetime pensions either. After their 5 years ends, you give them a severance pay, and that's that. That's that. There's no
Go
long.
back to the farm like you were supposed to back in the day when they put the Constitution.
Yeah,
You came to government, you were a public servant, then you got the hell out of there and went back to
yeah.
work. It was it.
Exactly. But you see, the thing is that for a lot of our college grads and high school grads, the most difficult thing is getting that first job. So if we have hundreds of thousands of new jobs opening up in government, temporary jobs, where they get work experience, they get a good salary, reasonable salary. They get incentives to help find ways to make things more efficient. And then after 5 years, they move on, but they'll have the job experience. They'll have, maybe hopefully a nest egg saved up. And
Isn't
it,
that what Doge is doing with these young kids? All these kids are under 25 years old. They're a bunch of brainiacs who just are geeks who want to look in this. So, how would you tweak Doge? What would you
I
do to
would,
the
okay,
government efficiency?
if it were me, I would say, first of all, let's have two or three qualified organizations come in and do a professional cost benefit analysis of the different government organizations. How much are we spending and what is the return on that investment? That's the number thing. And if we had, you see, I just don't believe when people associated with one political party, I just don't believe the facts that they give us. I think that you can never get your
So
facts.
what would make you believe like so when he goes through USAID, right? I would have to say 99% of the country did not know what USAID did, and they probably thought it was US aid, which was like a good thing, right?
Mhm,
But when we know that it's just the association of what is it, industrial development or something like that,
mhm,
it's not a good thing. It's a slush fund for the CIA
mhm,
and for other government
mhm,
waste. It's just a
mhm,
massive fraud waste with a cool name that sounds like it's doing something good.
mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they're in it. They're finding stuff. So what would
Mhm.
make you feel better that the stuff they're finding now somehow, I mean,
Because we're being told this by people who have, I believe, an ulterior political motive. I would,
but they're real organizations, and I'm not arguing with you.
yeah,
I'm not trying to take sides, but just to play devil's advocate,
right.
these are real organizations that they found that are getting money. They've proven here's an organization,
You mean an overseas organization?
right. And it's getting money. Okay, so we
Hmm.
have an actual organization, and that organization is actually getting money from our government. And that organization is bullshit. I mean, it's
Yeah,
proof. It's
well,
not hard to put the pieces together. So why
yeah,
is that a bad thing? Why can't
okay.
we get behind exposing these things, regardless of what party's doing? Like if Biden was doing it, everyone on the right would be freaking out, going, "It's bullshit." So, right?
Exactly,
It,
exactly. But the thing is that, like for example, they said $50 million worth of condoms were sent to Hamas, and then it was $100 million worth of condoms sent to Hamas, which just doesn't even, for me, even pass the stink test. I mean, $50 million
but
dollars.
here's the thing, Evan. Think about this for a second. If I Zelle you money, I
Hmm.
say, Evan, thanks for the $50. I'm going to Zelle you the $50 back.
Hmm.
There is a record of me sending you $50.
Hmm.
There's a record
Hmm.
of it. I pressed a
Hmm.
button, it went to you through your
Hmm.
phone. There's a
Hmm.
record. I get a
Hmm.
little thing that says, you sent Evan $50. There cannot be an organization that has sent money and it's not tracked. There's no
Hmm.
way you can tell me they press a button for $100 million for condoms
Hmm.
or $50 million for
Hmm.
condoms, and no one knows that that was done. And if
Hmm.
they find that it was done, and we have a record of it, how could you
Was
fight
that
it?
the, but that sounds like it was debunked though, that $50 million worth of condoms. You see, the thing is again,
But isn't there a trail of it? Isn't there someone who said, "Hey, we found someone
did
pressed a
they,
button and sent
uh-huh,
$50 million."
did they show concrete evidence of $50 million going into a Hamas bank account?
Supposedly, it's on a website that
Well,
tracks everything they're
supposedly.
finding.
See, the thing is that I would feel a lot better. Okay, let me just say, we violently agree when it comes to
Definitely,
government reform. Okay, we violently agree.
one
I
hundred
just,
percent.
I just, my feeling is that whether it's Democrats doing it or for it's Republicans, I have zero trust in political parties and I have zero trust in politicians. And
Agreed,
so,
100%.
and,
We
and
agree
if
on that 100%.
and if it's a political party doing it on its own, I have zero faith that they're doing it in good faith, that they're not doing it with one eye on some sort of political gain. Now, as I say, how would I be better believe it? How would I believe that this is really something that is politically neutral? Is if we had a real cost benefit analysis conducted. Okay, let's have a cost benefit analysis of USAID by a neutral organization. Ideally passed in a bipartisan way. We agree we're going to, just like the US, the Congressional Office, the Budget Office, which is supposed to be neutral. If they say something, it usually has, it has more credibility than one party or the other, let's just say. But we want to have this neutral, that we can agree is neutral as much as possible and have them have two or three actually independently doing a cost benefit analysis. And we find out, okay, we're giving $50 billion a year to USAID. And the return on that investment is minuscule. It's just absolutely, in fact, it's just wasting money. If I heard that coming, we had three different independent cost benefit analysis saying that, I would find that a lot more believable because I just don't, even if it's just one opinion from a neutral thing, I prefer to have two or three because, you know, sometimes people look at data differently and come to different conclusions. But if two out of the three agree, or ideally three out of the three agree that this is a waste of money, or if it turns out, actually we're investing this amount of money, but we're actually getting quite a bit of intangible, valuable intangibles in return. This is stuff that I would like to know. But I just do not, I have zero faith, and this applies to both parties, that government reform carried out by one party is going to be done in a politically neutral way that is really meant to benefit all of us and not so much and not just one party or another. For example, we talk about Pentagon reform. Okay, what my fear is that they're gonna cut spending at the Pentagon, but they're gonna cut it in ways that affect blue states or blue cities more than red cities. And I just don't believe that that's the way you should approach it. Let's approach it in a politically neutral way, and let's find out where the waste is, and let's take action accordingly.
I think everyone would agree with that.
Hmm.
Well, Evan, this we can go. You and I can go on forever and ever and ever and ever. But I've already taken up a ton of your time, so I want to get back to the core of you,
Uh-huh.
and I want to get back to the core of your the solutions party. So as we kind of bring this full circle and wrap this around,
Uh-huh.
um, I kind of read the one paragraph about your beliefs on the solutions party.
Uh-huh.
So in a nutshell, what would you say? I mean, what you gave me your what if you could,
Uh-huh.
but in a nutshell, the solutions party. What do you want? What do we need to do in your eyes that we could turn this behemoth around before it hits the iceberg and sinks?
Well, in the final analysis, all of the my contention is that all of the problems of our country really come down to our elected officials because they are the ones in whom we entrust the sacred power of the people. And the problem is that the people, as as John Boehner, the former House Speaker, said, is that you give them a little power and they completely change. And if you've ever known somebody who gets hopelessly addicted to something, they completely change as a person. Somebody who gets completely hopelessly addicted to alcohol or to drugs. And this is what happens when people get addicted to power. And so if we want our politics to really work again, if we want our democracy to work again, then it comes down to allocating power in ways that people cannot become addicted and where you encourage them to be truthful because there are penalties if you're not truthful. And they have no, you're basically telling them you have one chance to make your difference in history. You have one chance to make, a mark, your mark. Are you going to blow it? Or are you going to really work full time to really do some good, to advocate for your ideas, to exchange ideas with your peers, to compromise as necessary, and to move this country forward? So basically, it comes down to getting rid of the addiction to power in our politics and having our politicians concentrate. Because, as I said, the diversity of our ideas are our greatest strength. Let's have our politicians and we as people focus on ideas, get the lies and emotions out of it, focus on ideas. Let's exchange them in a civil way. And let's move forward. And let me just give you a little bit of just a little bit of personal experience on this.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
went to a very a small liberal arts college, and I was a young Republican. I mean, this was a liberal college in every way. I had just gotten through voting for Proposition 13 in California. I was staunch capitalist. I was anti-Soviet. And I got into a lot of emotionally charged discussions with my fellow students. But I can tell you this, that after all the heated arguing, that after all the intense debating, that after all the points and counterpoints had been made, we could still go eat dinner together, or eat lunch together, or get coffee together, go study together, laugh together. Because even though we disagreed sharply, we all knew that we all had the best interests at heart. We just had different ideas how to achieve those. Okay. And I learned from them. They learned from me. We influenced each other in positive ways. And, you know, it was never personal. And that's how things have to be in this country. We have to get rid of these. We have to make it so that people are exchanging ideas in civil ways, in non-emotional ways. We have to stop letting our emotions. One of the great weaknesses of humans, we humans, is that the ease with which our emotions can be manipulated. And people are taking advantage of that for profit, like they do with our media, and for power. And so we've got to address that by making our media credible again, and by getting penalizing politicians for lying. I mean, if you're going to hire me for a job, Gary, and you catch me lying during the interview, you have every right to kick me out of the interview. If a politician or aspiring politician lies during their campaign, they should be disqualified, because that's when you lie, you are committing a grave violation of democracy, because the voters need to be accurately informed to make informed decisions. And so, and if a politician lies after they're in office, just like if you hire me and you catch me lying on the job, you have every right to fire me. Why don't we hold our politicians to that same standard? It's even worse than lying on the job when you're lying as a politician, because you are violating the sacred trust of the people. And so once we get our politicians, they have no incentive to be running for reelection all the time, because there's no reelection. Once we have our media credible again, and once we penalize people for lying, our politicians for lying, I think the emotions will subside. And our politicians, the people we elect, should be examples of civility, and should work to tone down the emotions when things get a little emotional. Our politicians should be the control rods, like in a nuclear power plant, that help control the emotions, keep the, but instead they're exactly the opposite. They spur the emotions for personal gain. And this is what we want to get away from. In a nutshell, the Solutions Party is all about removing the addiction to politics, so our politicians concentrate on doing their job and not on staying in office, which is what we have now. And this is why Congress is a lapdog to the executive branch now, because they're also worried about being primaried. And that is just ridiculous. I mean, they should jealously guard the power that they have and not just be rubber stamping the executive branch. If they, a lot of both Democrats and Republicans, I'm sure if you got them confided, they would say, well, actually, I kind of agree with this and I would like to vote for it, but I'm afraid of being primaried. And okay, you're not going to be primaried, because you're not going to be running for reelection. So they can't control you like this. Your special interests can't control you by threatening to withhold funding, or threatening to back somebody else. So don't worry about that. Just concentrate on what you think is doing right.
Yeah. Like you said, since I can't run again, I'm going to vote my conscience. It's like,
Exactly.
what the hell were you voting all the other times if you weren't voting your conscience, you
Exactly.
knucklehead?
Yes,
So,
they were voting to stay in office. That's
exactly.
what they were voting for.
That's craziness. Well, listen, Evan, that you're amazing. We could do this for hours. This is awesome. Like I said, I went down the rabbit hole. So everybody, I'm going to try it again. We've got Evan Jaqua.
Actually, Jaqua, Jaqua.
Jaqua. Try
It's okay.
Jaqua.
Nobody gets it
Evan
right.
Jaqua.
Nobody gets it right. Nobody gets it right.
We've got Evan Jaqua, and you absolutely must. I'm telling you now. I never tell anyone they have to do anything, but I'm telling you now. You have to go to the Solutions Party, and look at that website and see what Evan's doing. I'm actually surprised. I from reading everything, I anticipated a different bend,
Uh-huh.
and happily it wasn't. You are on both sides of this. You care passionately about the country, regardless of party. The blue curtains or red curtains. Um, we
Yeah.
have to have some sort of reform. I don't
Yes.
care who does it. I don't care if it's a party. I don't care if it's aliens come down from outer space. I don't care who does it, but it's got to change, and
Yes.
it's got to change sooner than later, because we cannot keep going down this road we're going in this
Right.
country.
Yeah. That's really critical, is that this is not right or left. This is celebrating our diversity of our ideas, of our opinions, because that is our greatest strength. And you don't believe it, compare it to countries where they don't allow diversity of ideas. They're miserable, wretched countries. Let's harness our different diversity of our ideas, our opinions. This is our greatest strength. Let's do so in a civil way, and we'll be fine. We'll be fine. And so
Yeah,
this isn't like,
I miss debating with my friends about stuff. We used to do it all the time. Or it used to be that show Counterpoint or something like that, where
yes,
you had four
exactly.
Republicans and four Democrats. They spent an hour beating the crap out of each other, and then they went and had martinis and hugged and kissed. It's like, why can't we, to quote the great Rodney King, why can't we all just get along? It's complete madness.
We can't
And
get along because there's a lot of power and money to be made by spurring people's emotions and lying to them. That's what it's
100%,
all about. That's what it's
100%,
all about. And so we've got to get
100%.
the lies and the emotion manipulation out of the picture. Let's focus on ideas. Let's focus on facts. Let's move forward.
Yeah, I agree 100%, Evan. And so, listen, everybody, please, please, please go. We're going to post all the links to it at the end of the podcast and on all the other places that this podcast goes. But go to the Solutions Party website, check it out, get involved. Stop this damn tribalism. You could have all your own tribes you want. We don't care. But at some point, if we don't at least meet tribes for lunch once in a while and talk these things out, it's not going to end well. And
Right.
so, Evan, I really appreciate you speaking out. And we got to expose this and get 50 billion people on your. Has there 50 billion people? No, there's probably
No,
not. But we want to
not
get
yet.
at least 350 million people
Yes.
on your site,
Mm.
and just understanding that if we don't start talking about this together instead of talking at each other, talking to each other, it's just not going to stop because the enemies are way stronger than we are. We're weak and they're strong, and we need to get strong and make them weak. So,
Exactly. Exactly. We need to
yeah.
turn the tide, and the good news is within our power to do so.
Oh, yeah, doing this. We just need to do more of this. So,
Exactly.
all right, my friend, thank you so much.
Thank you,
This
Gary.
has been outstanding. I'm super grateful that you were on. And like you said, we should do this again. We
Let's
should
do it
come back
again.
and do another one of these. This is
Yeah.
fun.
And just to mention, I'm also on Twitter. It's
Hmm.
the underscore solutions party, underscore solutions party. So posting daily there. It's, the at underscore solutions party. And when I say Twitter, of course, I mean X. So you'll see daily posts there. And
So, we've got your website, which
so
is what?
solutionsparty.org.
Okay. And then we've got you on X, Twitter, whatever that
Right,
is.
right.
And that's where you do most of your blogging and stuff like that.
That's where I post daily comments, but we're going to be expanding to video casts, to other things. We're going to go, we're going to expand this much more to we're starting with X and with the website, but we're going to be going into regular video casts and podcasts. And again, Gary, I want to say how honored I've been being on your show. I've enjoyed this immensely, and I hope we can do it again sometime soon.
Oh,
I
definitely. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to this again. This has been great. I'm leaving the Green Party, everybody, and I'm going to the Solutions Party. All right, my
Wonderful.
friend. It's been a pleasure. We'll talk soon.
Sounds great, Gary. Thanks again. Take
See
care.
you guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again for joining us on another episode of What If You Could podcast. Please subscribe, like, share, and give us any feedback. We'd love to hear it. And remember, if you can dream it, you can do it. See you next time.